Okay, I want you to picture the most stressful envelope you can possibly get in the mail.
Oh, yeah.
For me, it's anything from the IRS or maybe a homeowners association letter telling me my grass is like half an inch too tall.
It's that instant spike in your heart rate, that feeling that you've crossed some line you didn't even know was there.
Right. We live in a world of rules, tax codes, traffic laws, unspoken social rules on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it this week.
Mhm.
And usually the vibe of a rule is I am watching you and I am waiting for you to slip up. It feels like a trap.
It's the classic view of law as a restriction, a giant stop sign, a fence that keeps you in and keeps the fun out.
But, and this is where we're going today, what if we have that completely backward? What if the ultimate purpose of a massive, ancient, intimidating legal code wasn't to restrict you, but was actually a mechanism for freedom?
Okay.
And even weirder, for deep personal affection.
That is a very different way to look at a rule book.
Today we're doing a deep dive into a theological text. It's titled The True Fulfillment of the Law, Love that Transcends Condemnation and Saves Life. And let me tell you, this document takes a sledgehammer to the idea that rules are just about being correct.
It really does. It's a fascinating piece of writing because it takes the ancient Mosaic law, which is, famous for being incredibly detailed and strict, and it tries to decode the why behind it. It argues that we've basically been reading the data wrong for centuries.
And there is a lot of data to read. We're talking about the law given to the Israelites. And when I first looked at the source material, I was honestly a little intimidated. The sheer volume of regulations mentioned is, well, it's overwhelming.
It is. But that's the mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack how the author deconstructs all those commandments, hundreds of them, and sort of reassembles them into a single surprising principle.
Okay.
And the text suggests that if you miss this one principle, you aren't just missing the point. You might actually be doing the opposite of what the law intended.
So let's get into the numbers. Because the text throws some specific stats at us right away. We aren't just talking about the big 10 commandments here.
No, not at all. While the 10 Commandments are the famous summary, the source highlights the traditional count of the entire Mosaic Law. It says there are exactly 613 commandments.
613. Let's just pause on that for a second. I mean, I can barely remember to drink 8 glasses of water a day.
Right.
Imagine waking up every morning knowing there are 613 distinct boxes you have to check or avoid checking just to be a good person.
It sounds exhausting, doesn't it? It sounds like a system designed for failure.
It sounds like a minefield.
Hmm.
One wrong step and boom. But the text breaks these down in a way that I found really surprising. It doesn't just list them, it categorizes them into 2 buckets. First, you have the prohibitions, the don'ts, and there are 365 of them.
365 negative commands.
Okay, so my brain immediately goes to the calendar. 365 days in a year. Is that just a coincidence, or is the text implying something there?
It's definitely not a coincidence. The symbolism there, and this is common in these types of rabbinic analyses, is that for every single day of the year, there is a restriction.
Wow.
There's no day off from the law. Every sunrise brings a new requirement to, abstain from evil.
So the law covers all of time. But then we have the second bucket,
Yeah.
the affirmations, the does.
Right.
The text says there are 248 of these. Now, I don't know of a calendar with 248 days, so what's the code here?
This one's a bit more biological. In traditional ancient anatomy, it was believed that the human body was made up of 248 limbs or major bones.
Whoa. So if you combine those two.
You get the full picture. The don'ts cover every day you live 365. The does cover every part of who you are, 248. The argument is that the law wasn't just a list of rules, it was a total immersion. It was meant to cover your entire existence in time and in body.
That feels incredibly heavy. Like we own every day and we own every bone in your body.
It does.
But the author of our source text argues that there's a hidden pattern within these numbers that flips the script. To see it, we have to zoom back into the 10 Commandments.
Right, the ones given to Moses. The text performs a kind of structural analysis on them.
Okay.
It points out a split. It asks us to look at Commandments 1 through 4. You shall have no other gods. Don't make idols, that sort of thing. The text summarizes these as focusing entirely on one thing: love God.
Okay, so if I'm visualizing the stone tablets, the first section it's vertical. It's about the relationship upwards between a person and the divine.
You're tracking. Now look at Commandments 5 through 10. Honor your parents, do not murder, do not steal.
Yeah.
The text summarizes all of those as love your neighbor.
So the second section is horizontal. Relationships with the people around us. Wait a minute. If you put those together, a vertical beam and a horizontal beam,
You get a cross.
that is visually striking. Even before we get to the New Testament part of the story, the structure of the law itself is forming this shape.
And that geometry really matters for the text's argument. The author asserts that whether you're looking at the Big Ten or the full 613, every single rule converges on one single concept: love.
So do not steal isn't just about property rights. It's technically a love language.
That's the claim. The source says ultimately the law is about love. The logic is, if you truly loved your neighbor, you wouldn't steal from them. If you truly love them, you wouldn't lie to them or hurt them. The rule is just the outer shell. The filling is love.
that changes the headspace completely, because if I think do not steal, I'm thinking about protecting myself or staying out of jail. But if
Mhm.
I think love your neighbor, suddenly stealing isn't just a property crime, it's a relationship failure. It's personal.
And the source defines that character specifically as compassion and love.
Hmm.
It argues that if you follow the law correctly, if you understand the data properly, you end up with a heart of compassion. You become someone who saves lives, not someone who just points out errors.
But that's the ideal scenario, right? If you understand it. Because the source material takes a pretty dark turn here. It describes a conflict and
Mhm.
says there are two ways to read this law, and they aren't just different interpretations, they are opposites.
This is a crucial distinction in the text. It presents a binary view. It describes the difference between misunderstanding the law and understanding the law, and it says the gap between them is the difference between heaven and earth.
Okay, let's talk about path A, misunderstanding. This is where the text gets really intense. It talks about viewing the law as a tool for condemnation.
Path A is when you take that list of 613 rules
Mhm.
and you use it as a weapon. You scan the people around you looking for the 365 don'ts, and when you find one, you strike. The source argues that when the law is used this way, it becomes a tool of death.
Now, we need to pause here and contextualize something, because the text uses some very charged language regarding the historical figures involved. It talks about the Jews of that time period, specifically the religious leaders, and it calls them villains in this narrative.
That's a very important note. The text is making a theological argument here, not just a historical one, and it characterizes those specific leaders as having been deceived by the murderous devil.
Murderous devil. I mean, that is about as heavy as an accusation gets. It feels aggressive.
It is aggressive, but we have to look at why the author is using that language. The argument isn't about ethnicity, it's about intent. The text claims that because the devil is defined as a murderer from the beginning,
Right.
anyone who uses religion to kill or destroy is, by definition, aligning themselves with the devil.
So the logic is, if your interpretation of the Bible leads you to kill someone, you aren't serving God, no matter how many verses you quote. You're serving the murderer.
That is the core of the critique. The text argues that they obsessed over the letter of the law, the tricked enforcement, and they lost the spirit, which was life. They became condemners.
Which brings us to path B, understanding, the hero of this narrative.
Exactly. The source identifies Jesus as the representative of the holy love of the law. The text argues that he demonstrates that the law is actually spiritual and holy. It's not a weapon of death, it's a tool for salvation.
And the source gives us a really specific case study to prove this. It's a famous story, the woman caught in adultery. But I want to really look at the tension here. This wasn't just, a polite debate. This was a mob.
It was a trap. You have a woman dragged into the public square, she's terrified, and you have religious leaders holding stones, heavy, jagged rocks, and they have the law on their side.
That's the scary part. According to the 613 laws, specifically the prohibitions, she had broken the law.
Technically, yes.
Mhm.
The penalty written in the code was death. So the misunderstanding group, those focused on condemnation, were ready to kill her. They felt justified.
Sure,
They had the rule book in one hand and a rock in the other.
they probably felt like they were the good guys. The law says X, we are doing X, we are keeping the community clean.
They applied the law of condemnation. But then you have Jesus, and the source says he applied the law of love. He chose forgiveness.
But here is where it gets really tricky for me. Did Jesus just ignore the law? Did he just say, the rules don't matter, everyone go home? Because if he did that, doesn't that make the law meaningless?
That is the pivotal question.
Mhm.
And the expert analysis in the source says no. He wasn't ignoring the law. He was applying its true intent. Remember the synthesis we talked about earlier? That the core of the law is save life and love neighbor.
Right. The vertical and the horizontal beam.
By saving her, Jesus was actually fulfilling the law more perfectly than the people holding the stones. The text says misunderstanding leads to killing. Understanding leads to saving. Jesus showed that the correct application of the law is the one that results in life, not death.
That flips the script completely. Usually we think mercy is suspending the law, like I'll let you off with a warning.
Right.
But this source argues that mercy is the law.
Well put. The text says Jesus applied the law of love and chose forgiveness. It wasn't a bypass. It was the proper function of the machinery. The machine was built to produce love. The Pharisees were using it to produce death.
This leads us to the paradox, because the text explicitly mentions that Jesus did not come to abolish the law.
I came not to abolish, but to fulfill. That's the classic line.
But how does the cross fit into this fulfillment? Because usually when we think of fulfilling a contract, we think of like paying a debt.
The source unpacks the mechanics of this in a really interesting way. It views the crucifixion through this lens of perfect obedience. Think back to the 248 do's and the 365 don'ts.
Okay.
The text argues that the cross was a dual act that satisfied both. First, it was an act of total obedience to God. Remember commandments 1 through 4. Love God.
So by submitting to the cross, he was checking the vertical box perfectly.
He was living out the do's. He was loving God with all his heart, even to the point of death. But then there's the horizontal side, the love neighbor. The text says he shed his precious blood for us sinners.
So he took the penalty for the 365 don'ts that everyone else broke?
He closed the loop from both ends. He kept the law of love, the dos, and he paid the price for the law of sin, the don'ts. The author highlights that by dying, Jesus perfectly embodied the spirit of love in the law.
Huh.
He didn't just talk about it, he completed the requirements.
It's almost like he balanced the ledger. The law required a perfect life and a perfect sacrifice, and the text argues he provided both at the same time.
And that's why the text says he practiced the law. It frames it almost like a skill or a discipline. He practiced it not as a prosecutor, but as a savior.
So this brings us to the big so what for the reader, because the text doesn't just want us to admire Jesus, it wants us to change our own identity.
This is the identity shift. The source issues a call to action. It defines two identities, sons of God and condemners.
And based on what we've discussed, condemner is the failure state. It's the default setting if we aren't careful.
It is. The text warns that if we use the law or our standards of truth to judge and condemn others, we slide back into that servant of the devil role.
Right.
We fail the test of the law.
But to be a son of God
Means to adopt the saving mindset. The text explicitly states, if we understand the law as a law of love, we will become sons of God and seek to save others.
So your spiritual identity isn't defined by how much theology you know or how strictly you follow the diet. It's defined by how you treat people who have messed up.
That's the metric. The source defines the gospel itself as believing in and following the Jesus who turned the law into love. It's not just believing he existed, it's believing in that method of operation.
The source even gives some practical instruction. It says we need to spread the truth of love to the whole world.
And notice the phrasing, not spread the rules, not spread the judgment,
Right.
spread the truth of love. It urges readers to treat neighbors with the same compassion Jesus showed.
It seems like such a simple concept, be nice, but when you layer it over 613 commandments and centuries of religious history, it feels revolutionary. It suggests that if your truth hurts people, it's not actually the truth.
That is the core argument. The text is very firm on this. You cannot be a condemner and a son of God at the same time. You have to pick a side. Are you throwing stones or are you offering a hand up?
It's a powerful lens to view the world through. We started this deep dive looking at a stack of 613 rules,
Yeah.
a mix of do's and don'ts that seemed impossible to navigate.
And we found that the author boils them all down to a single mandate: save lives through love.
It really redefines what it means to be law-abiding, doesn't it? It moves the goalpost from correctness to compassion.
And that is something relevant to everyone, whether you're religious or not. We all live in systems of rules, workplaces, families, societies. We all have laws we expect people to follow.
I think about cancel culture or just the way we treat people on social media. We're often like those guys with the stones. We have the screenshots. We have the evidence that someone broke the rules of our social group, and we feel justified in destroying them.
That is the modern version of the law of condemnation. It feels righteous in the moment. But this text challenges us to ask, is this saving life? Or is it just feeding our own need to be right?
So here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. As you go about your week, you're going to encounter people who are wrong. Maybe they broke a rule, maybe they messed up a project, maybe they just have a bad opinion that drives you crazy.
And the temptation will be to correct them, to judge them, to apply the law.
But I want to leave you with this thought, derived from the logic of the text we read today. If the ultimate measure of truth is whether your actions save or condemn others, how many of your current right opinions are actually wrong simply because they lack love?
That is a question worth sitting with.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.